Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
For signs of trouble in the economy, you look at those initial jobless claims. I don't think that's showing any signs of real problems at all in the economy. Still very good. Come on,
I'm not so sure you're right on this one.
My cup is half full.
I see some weakness here. Those are not as strong numbers as I thought we were going to get.
Slowing down, but not, I wouldn't use the word weak.
I think you're right. Slowing down is the accurate story here. I want to bring in economist, and his name is Steve Moore. He is the chief economist with the Heritage Foundation. He's the author of the book Trumponomics. There it is on your screen. All right, Steve. I know you dismiss talk of a recession anytime soon, but the Federal Reserve says the economy is slowing, and the GDP numbers show the same thing. The market's tumbling in part because of what is clearly a slowing down. Investors disappointed. Your response?
Well, it's pretty rich for the Fed to say the economy's slowing down, because I think actually they've been a big part of the slowdown. And by the way, what we're talking about in the slowdown is the economy over the last 6 months has grown at a little under 4%. And right now, the latest forecast is for the fourth quarter to be somewhere in the 2.5% range. Is that a slowdown from
the rate of growth? Sure. Look, it's a disappointment, Steve.
Yeah.
When you came out with those tax cuts, you were telling us consistently that we would get 4% growth.
Right.
We only got 4% growth in 1 quarter. You got to. This is a slowdown. Slowdown in the rate of growth.
Yeah. When you go from 4 to 2.5%, that's a slowdown. But look, I'm very optimistic about the future. In fact, there's this mythology out there that there's some kind of sugar high from the Trump tax cuts, which is ridiculous. I mean, these tax cuts don't expire on January 1, 2019. They don't expire until 2014 or 2024.
Okay. Well,
2025.
what's your forecast for growth in next year? What is your number for growth next year?
I'm still in the 3 to 3.5% range, which is very positive, and I'm in that range for 2020 as well. I mean, we're on a higher growth path, from the 2% growth we were at under Obama. So I look, and by the way, these low oil prices are good for the economy. They're great for consumers. They're great for manufacturers. They're great for the construction industry. It's like a tax cut for the entire American economy. When you see what's the oil price at now, like a little about $50 a barrel. So that's all very positive.
Okay.
Look, all we have to do is get this trade situation. If you get some progress on the trade negotiations between China and Trump, where you get real progress, because it appears that what happened over the weekend, the Chinese have been walking away from that, then you're going to see the economy explode. So there's a huge upside that you're not. You're a Debbie Downer today, Stuart.
No,
what's with you?
No, I'm not. Look, you've got 4% growth in the second quarter, 3.5% in the third quarter, maybe 2.5% in the fourth quarter.
Right.
I call that a slowdown in the rate of growth. And I'm not surprised that there are some people saying maybe we keep on with the slowdown and we get a recession fairly soon.
So my point, Stuart, is, this is so important for investors to understand. The reason the economy has slowed down in the last 2 months or so has been because the Fed has been way too tight. By the way, Trump called that the day that the Fed announced its latest interest rate increase, that this was going to be very negative for the economy. It has been. I mean, there's not inflation out there. They are combating a phantom menace. Look, I'm a hard dollar guy. I don't want inflation. There isn't inflation. There's deflation. When you get the oil price that's fallen by $20 a barrel, that's a sign of deflationary impact, and deflation is bad for the economy. So keep the interest rates where they are. Keep providing dollars for the economy, and we'll be fine. I really think this is a Fed-inspired slowdown.
Okay, got it. Steve Moore, thank you very much indeed.
It is Friday, the 7th of December of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, folks. The French 77s have been virtually mixed, and they are actually ready early. We're not going to wait till the chef's table for these French 77s. It's going to be one of those weekends, and it begins with Mueller Friday. A day that will live in infamy. That's right. Whatever safe harbor Trump and his crew think that they have moored in is not going to be so safe anymore. And Trump finally realizes it. I am actually coming to the belief, and I've actually suspected this all along. You know, they just don't care. They've gotten away with it for so long. When I say they, I don't mean just this administration. I'm talking about Trump and his family from the get-go. They've been getting away with it because, you know, law and order is really for little people. It doesn't apply to them. And then add the mob component. And then live a life of that where he just never, ever is held to account. Always gets away with it. And you can understand the actions of impunity that they seem to have embraced. Doesn't matter. I mean, from the very beginning, campaign finance, there's a violation in the campaign laws, colluding with the NRA, which they're not supposed to do. The same guy buying ad buys for the NRA and the Trump campaign. They didn't even try to hide it. They didn't care, because they're just going to get away with it anyway. If anybody complains, woe be to them. Let's jump ahead a little bit. Look at what happened to Sally Yates. Flynn didn't get fired, but Sally Yates did. Well, and Trump is going off today. He started going off last night, and we do have a story. We're going to touch upon the bomb threat at CNN here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But the consensus is that Trump's all-cap tweet last night about the fake news is an enemy of the people. Minutes or half an hour or so, CNN had to be evacuated because of bomb threats, and apparently 5 bombs. On the other hand, didn't CNN already have actual, bombs mailed to them? But Trump has been just tweeting up a storm today because it is Mueller Friday, and he is frightened and or pissed, both. And no word yet about December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. No word. A day that will live in infamy. And it will. It is Mueller Friday. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu? We could go on. There's so much news that I can't pack it all in. I can't. We have tried before, and it is an impossible task now in this administration. So we have curated an actual show for you today. It maybe has an arc. We'll see. On the rest of the menu, of course, at the top, that was the Fox Business Network. really taken Stephen Moore and, by extension, the whole of the Trump administration for, well, getting their massive tax cuts passed. But, hey, how about the economic growth that you promised? Well, yeah, the markets are tanking. I hope they recover soon. I mean, I'm at that age where it's going to really impact me. Jeez, it's harder to make it up when you lose it all at this age. Jeez. Well, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Supreme Court spent its morning yesterday smacking around a lawyer for pandering to Gorsuch, and in the process lost the other Supreme Court justices. Oops. CNN's New York offices and studios were evacuated last night due to a bomb threat after Trump unleashed a frantic Twitter attack on the fake news. Yeah, he's going to get people killed. In fact, he already has. Washington Post journalist got dismembered while he was still alive. But, we have some sort of arms deal with Saudi Arabia so that they can attack us again. I mean, they can't do it unless we supply them. And with the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and other major tourism landmarks closed this weekend because of the national protests, the French government defended its heavy-handed police tactics against high school students. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where British police arrested a group of neo-Nazis with ties to an American neo-Nazi group responsible for the murder of 5 people. And an overwhelming majority of Americans really want the new Congress, and we're looking at you, Democrats, to release Trump's tax returns. Seems only fair and balanced. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and do check out her shows on Saturdays. I said shows, indeed. The first one being At the Table with Kelly Lincoln begins at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. A few hours later, she then teams up with Ricky May for the Round Table Roundhouse Power Hour beginning at 9 p.m. West Coast, midnight Eastern Time. And it is a power hour, so do tune in. And you can then, if you would, please take a look to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and you will then notice the contribute button. And I know it's the holidays, but we're in one of those holiday fund drives because we are unable to do this without you. And if you could become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, your donation goes a long ways. And as I mentioned, we're unable to do this without you. And your generosity pays these bills. So thank you very much for that. And the bills have gone up. That's why I'm making probably more of an entreaty than I would normally feel comfortable with. So thank you very much for all of your generosity. And you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. You can follow Netroots Radio on Facebook if you want. We hate Zuckerberg, and we're really not afraid to say so. But we're there because a lot of people tend to be, including family. So there you go. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 20 10 minutes before showtime. What happens 20 minutes before showtime? I'm still busy. I'm busy at 10 minutes, too. So check out the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So this first article comes our way here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy from Think Progress by the great Ian Millhiser. Well, it looks like no one gives a damn about originalism. I thought that's what this was all about. Originalism, and what originalism really means. It's not what the founders thought at the time that they composed the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all the debates that came before. No, that's not originalism. Originalism is like what the Republicans and the right wing always does, and that's make stuff up. That's originalism. So, well, Terrence Gamble's lawyers appeared to walk into the Supreme Court yesterday morning with a single goal in mind: lock down Neil Gorsuch's vote. And they're probably going to succeed in that goal. Yet, in their single-minded pursuit of one of the court's most idiosyncratic members, Team Gamble is likely to see a Pyrrhic victory. As attorney Louis Chaitin repeatedly parroted originalist arguments that seemed tailor-made for Gorsuch, he seemed oblivious to the fact that he was losing the rest of the bench. It turns out that most of the Supreme Court cares a whole lot more about what impact their decision could have in 2018 than they do about a 1662 decision involving separate prosecutions in English and Welsh courts. There is a lesson for future Supreme Court advocates here. In your zeal to assemble unlikely coalitions between liberal and conservative members of the court, don't take the liberals for granted. If you do, you risk tanking an eminently winnable case. The tragedy of Gamble v. United States is that it involves a very real injustice. Mr. Gamble was convicted of being a felon in possession of a firearm by federal and state courts. Gamble was punished by the state of Alabama and sentenced to an additional 46 months in federal prison. His lawyers argue that this double sentencing violates the Constitution's command that no one shall, quote, be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, end quote. The problem with this argument is that it is utterly at odds with precedent. Although there is some debate about whether the doctrine at issue in Gamble is 70 years old or more like 170 years old. Under the Supreme Court separate sovereigns doctrine, each of the states and the federal government are all capable of dealing with the same subject matter within the same territory. So it violates the double jeopardy clause for the federal government to prosecute Gamble twice for the same offense, and it violates the same clause if Alabama prosecutes him twice. But each is allowed its own crack at convicting and punishing him. Because isn't that what it's all about? Punishment. Gamble's brief fixates on claims that the separate sovereigns doctrine violates original understanding of the Constitution. Now I come back to the right wing's definition of original. Well, it cites 17th and 18th century court cases holding that a court in England could not convict someone who was already tried in Wales or Portugal, as well as treatises that are about the same age as the Constitution itself. Similarly, when Attorney Chaitin steps up to the Supreme Court podium to make his argument, he leans hard into these originalist arguments, labeling the separate sovereigns doctrine inconsistent with the Constitution's text and with its original meaning. If the Supreme Court had 5 Gorsuches, This would be a sensible tactic. Gorsuch, at the very least, claims to believe that the Constitution should be interpreted solely as it was originally understood. And while Gorsuch did ask a few skeptical questions, he appeared likely to vote for Mr. Gamble by the end of Thursday's argument. But Chaitin's strategy left 7 other members of the court in the dark. Now, of course, Clarence Thomas, as his ordinary practice, did not speak during the argument. Not long after Chaitin took the podium, the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg asked if Chaitin's proposed rule would permit any country in the world to frustrate an American prosecution. Chaitin responded that American courts would not need to honor sham or collusive prosecutions that took place in a foreign nation or in another state. But that doesn't avoid a closely related problem. What if terrorists murder Americans abroad, Justice Samuel Alito asked, yet are not convicted because of an inept foreign prosecutor? Should that prevent American courts from hearing the case? Building off Alito's hypothetical, Brett Kavanaugh worried that Chaitin's rule would substantially hamper national security. Many of Chaitin's responses to these questions are as monotonous as they are tone deaf. His response to Alito, for example, begins with the words, "under the original understanding." Yeah, the original. They like to make it up. That's so original. Meanwhile, several other justices raised a different, equally troubling problem with Chaitin's claims. This is a 170-year-old rule, Kagan declared. The doctrine of stare decisis, which provides that courts generally should follow past precedents, is a doctrine of humility. The court should not toss out old rules simply because its current members thinks that we can do it better. This concern is echoed by Kavanaugh, who suggested that past precedents should only be overruled when they are egregiously reasoned, and by Justice Stephen Breyer. Even Sotomayor, ordinarily the court's most outspoken proponent of criminal justice reform, appeared bothered by Chaitin's call to overrule long-standing precedent. Do you have any current case that supports your understanding of the centuries-old English rule? Sotomayor asked, as Chaitin was flailing at one point. Indeed, Gorsuch himself seemed frustrated by Chaitin's unwillingness to address his colleagues' practical concerns. All of the court's frustrations came to a head when Chaitin's time at the podium was running out. Your argument is one note, Kagan told Chaitin in an unusually candid exchange. Yes, there are members of the court who think that originalism is the alpha and omega of constitutional interpretation, but most of them do not. So maybe Chaitin would like to take a few minutes to address the concerns of those justices as well? Well, Kagan is at once the court's master strategist on the left and one of the court's savviest political thinkers. In a public appearance last September, she warned that it is incumbent upon the court to be aware of its own limited political capital and not to do things where people will reject the court and say, we don't view it as legitimate anymore. She called upon her colleagues to take big questions and make them small, an approach that would also prevent a court dominated by conservatives from shoving the law too far to the right. Well, justice is, in other words, a kind of anti-Gorsuch. While Gorsuch's originalism pulls him towards massive, sweeping changes to the law, Kagan speaks the language of modesty and restraint. Her suggestion to Chaitin was not simply a warning to lawyers advocating before her bench. It was likely also an appeal to justices such as John Roberts, who often speak a similar language. But at the end of the day, Mr. Gamble's lawyers gave the court very little to work with. They placed fashionable arguments ahead of the more practical concerns felt by most of the court, and it is likely that their client will pay the price for that decision. Next offering comes by way of Alternate by Cody Fenwick here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Well, CNN's New York City offices and studios were evacuated Thursday night due to a bomb threat, forcing the network to switch to pre-filmed programming. "We are evacuated in the middle of my live show," reported CNN host Don Lemon. "Bomb threat. We're running tape programming. NYPD is investigating. Stay tuned." Host Brian Stelter said the NYPD is investigating a bomb threat near CNN New York City offices at Columbus Circle. Due to the threat, the office has been evacuated. Well, many observers pointed out not long before the threat had been made public, Trump had posted a barrage of frantic tweets, including one that was contextless, and another attack on the press. "Fake news, the enemy of the people," in all caps. Initial reports conflicted about the precise time of the bomb threat itself, raising questions about whether Trump's tweet might have instigated the attack. The NYPD posted on Twitter that the threat came in at 10:35, but then later amended that to 10:07. Trump's tweet was posted at 10:08. Earlier in the night, Trump had lambasted the fake news media on Twitter as well, falsely claiming that reporters don't mention the Republican midterm gains in the Senate. And apparently, one of his psychopaths thought that was enough to, call in a bomb threat and close down CNN. At the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes by way of Reuters. Dateline Paris. France's government today defended the tactics of riot police who forced several dozen detained high school students to kneel in rows with their hands held behind their heads or in handcuffs after violent protests west of Paris. Students this week have been blocking access to scores of high schools across France in protest at Emmanuel Macron's education reforms, just as the 40-year-old leader grapples with sometimes violent demonstrations over living costs. Videos and photos of the students from two high schools in the Val-Fort, a deprived neighborhood outside of Mantes-la-Jolie, 60 kilometers west of Paris, went viral on social media late on Thursday, prompting public outrage. Over the past few days, the students have been joined by about 100 hooded youths armed with clubs and incendiary devices and determined to pick a fight with police, Interior Minister Christophe Castaner told a news conference. Castaner said roadblocks had been set alight, projectiles hurled at motorists, and houses robbed in the area around the two schools. It is in this context that the security forces stepped in, the minister added. No students were injured while detained in the Val-Fort incident, French media reported, but some social media users said the scene, with some of the teenagers lined up facing a wall, resembled a mock mass execution. Can anyone tell me if they've witnessed such a thing in the last 50 years? One observer observed. Another said these images of teenagers on their knees at the feet of the riot police are unworthy of a democracy. The government needs to take charge and reestablish chains of command. Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer described the images as shocking, but said the violence convulsing France in recent weeks justified the heavy-handed policing. Now, France is hunkering down for another wave of potentially violent protests tomorrow as Macron struggles to quell public anger at the cost of living. Senior allies said he would address the nation early next week, and in anticipation of the violent protests in Paris this weekend. Major tourism sites such as the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay, all of them have been closed. That brings us to our break period, and when we come back from the break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a ride like no other. Road trips and fish-out-of-water stories are par for the course in comedies. However, few dramas about racism incorporate such elements, much less provide as many laughs as the new movie Green Book. Set in 1962 and written and directed by Peter Farrelly from There's Something About Mary and Shallow Hal, the movie is based on the true story of Frank Anthony Vallelonga, a New York bouncer who lands a job chauffeuring African-American pianist and composer Don Shirley on a tour through the Deep South. Named for the popular guide for black travelers designating safe spaces for them to eat and stay in the Jim Crow era, Green Book tells the story of an unlikely friendship forged on the road. The loud, boorish Tony, played by Viggo Mortensen in a likely-to-be-nominated role, seems an unlikely choice for the job given the discomfort he displays in an early scene with two black repairmen in his apartment and the fact that he rarely ventures outside his Italian-American neighborhood. Likewise, the quiet, sophisticated Don, played by Oscar winner Mahershala Ali, seems like he'll be unable to tolerate Tony for a day, much less the weeks they're expected to spend on the road. However, as we soon learn, these characters are complex. Underneath Don's smooth exterior is a lonely man who isn't being true to himself. In one telling scene, he confesses feeling not black enough for the black world, yet unable to fit into the white world, which has afforded him his career and affluence. Likewise, Tony shows a level of tolerance and understanding after learning of an aspect of Don's character, which isn't expected given their initial meeting. While the ending of Green Book may be a tad sentimental, it is nonetheless an important film and one that will do well during award season. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Lucy Wong. If you have a dog, you've probably tried to train it. The basics, like sit and stay, plus, of course, not to go to the bathroom on your rugs. And if your dog learns things quickly, you might start to think it's really smart. But
if you really want to know about dog intelligence, you have to look at non-dogs as well to understand what's special to dogs and what is just typical of groups they belong to.
Stephen Lee, a retired professor of psychology from the University of Exeter in the UK. He and colleagues looked at dog intelligence in an animal intelligence context for a report in the journal Learning and Behavior. Lee and his team looked at hundreds of published studies to compare dog cognition with that of other animals. They found that dogs are adept at picking up on social cues.
They're good, for example, at using human pointing or following human gaze, you're looking at what you're looking at. We're not saying that dogs aren't good at those tasks. They are. What we were saying is that there are some other animals that are just as good at them.
Like bottlenose dolphins and gray seals.
It's not something that's unique to dogs, or indeed that's unexpected in dogs, given the sorts of animals dogs are. Namely, they're domesticated, they're derived from, at least, social hunters, and important, they're carnivores. They belong to the big group of mammals that also includes cats, hyenas, otters, bears, and also the seals and sea lions, which we sometimes forget about, but which, of course, are also very easy to train, despite not being domestic.
And while dog cognition may not actually be exceptional, their noses definitely are.
Their sense of smell, the extraordinary things that they can discriminate, like which of two identical twins they're looking at or sniffing at.
Lee also points out there are some tasks that dogs apparently cannot do, such as use tools or exhibit self-awareness. But
there's always the possibility that someone somewhere is at this moment demonstrating that the dog can do something that we said it couldn't, and because you can't prove a negative. So we could be wrong. In some sense, one reason why we wrote the paper was to challenge our colleagues to, show us the evidence. Find a dog that will do these things, and we'll happily change our minds. We're not, I can feel the word coming, we're not dogmatic.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Lucy Wong.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm dreaming of a white, non-sectarian, non-denominational, non-government-sponsored late December holiday. Hey, honey, come quick. It's the ACLU Carolers.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
'Tis the season, the silly season, the time of year when some claim that the ACLU is against Christmas because we and other groups that believe in religious freedom fight to maintain the First Amendment guarantee of a wall of separation between church and state. Separation of church and state means that religious symbols, including a creche, that's a structure depicting baby Jesus in the manger, can be displayed on private property, but that public property is reserved for all the people and not one specific religion. It is the First Amendment's Establishment Clause that prohibits the government from endorsing, favoring, supporting, or trying to establish a national religion. The other half of the guarantee of religious freedom in America is the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause guarantees the right to observe and celebrate Christmas and freely exercise religious beliefs and to sing or not sing. So may your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Donald Trump is expected to nominate State Department spokeswoman and former Fox and Friends anchor Heather Nauert to replace Nikki Haley as our new UN ambassador. Reacting to the news, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy had some reservations.
Our foreign policy is a mess, and the president was laughed at in his last speech before the UN. And I'm not sure anybody would advise him that the way to correct correct all his mistakes is to put a Fox and Friends anchor as our top ambassador to the United Nations. Heather Nauert, has been at the State Department, so it's not as if she has no experience, but she has no experience as a diplomat. She has no meaningful experience in government. She is clearly not qualified for this job, but these days it seems that the most important qualification is that you show up on Donald Trump's TV screen, and if you're successful in that endeavor, then you seem to be a top candidate to get a whole bunch of top positions in the U.S. government.
The nomination requires Senate confirmation. Get the popcorn ready. The New York Times is reporting that, according to people close to Trump, the president is strongly considering nominating William P. Barr, who served as Attorney General during the first Bush administration from 1991 to 93, to return to head up the Justice Department. Although he's considered an establishment pick, Barr has criticized aspects of the Russia investigation, including suggesting that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, hired too many prosecutors who had donated to Democratic campaigns. Barr has also defended Trump's calls for a new criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton, including over a uranium mining deal the Obama administration approved when she was Secretary of State. In other staffing news, the Senate on Thursday confirmed a woman named Kathy Kraninger as the next head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She doesn't appear to have much discernible knowledge of or interest in consumer protection and financial services, and she wasn't on anyone's radar before her nomination. The outcome of the race for North Carolina's 9th congressional district is still in limbo. Democrat Dan McCready withdrew his concession to Republican Mark Harris amid an investigation into allegations of election fraud.
A month ago, I conceded to my opponent Mark Harris in the race for North Carolina's 9th congressional district. But last week, we began to learn about shameful criminal activity bankrolled by my opponent to take away North Carolinians' very rights to vote. I didn't serve overseas in the Marine Corps just to come back home and watch politicians and career criminals attack our democracy. That's why today I withdraw my concession to Mark Harris, who's remained completely silent. And I call on Mark Harris to tell us exactly what he knew and when he knew it.
Harris bested McCready by 905 votes on November 6th, but the state's Board of Elections has refused to certify the results after two people claimed they were paid by a Republican operative to collect absentee ballots from voters. The state GOP is calling for a full investigation. Democrats are demanding a new general election and have the option of refusing to seat Harris until the investigation is resolved. Congress on Thursday approved a 2-week government funding bill, kicking a fight over the border wall to December 21st. New reports surfacing Friday morning that Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, is on his way out. CNN's Caitlin Collins has more.
We are expecting John Kelly, the chief of staff, to resign in the coming days. That is the mood in the White House right now because President Trump and his chief of staff, though they are 17 months into what has been a very tumultuous relationship, it is no longer seen as sustainable by either party, I am being told by sources inside the White House. Their relationship has deteriorated so greatly over the last several weeks where John Kelly's job security has essentially been seen as permanently endangered that right now the president and his chief of staff are not even on speaking terms. Now, multiple West Wing officials believe that John Kelly could resign in the coming days, and they are essentially preparing themselves for a pretty big staff shakeup in the West Wing if that does occur, because then it's going to raise questions about, one, who's going to replace John Kelly, and two, are the people who are seen as loyalists to John Kelly in this administration going to leave and follow him out the door of the White House?
Friday could be a busy day in Mueller world as prosecutors are set to file sentencing memos on both former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and former Trump attorney and fixer Michael Cohen.
New documents that are scheduled to be released today could shed new light on Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Prosecutors for the Southern District of New York and the special counsel's office both have until 5 p.m. tonight to deliver sentencing memos concerning President Trump's former fixer Michael Cohen. The documents are expected to detail Cohen's cooperation in those ongoing investigations. Mueller's team should also be filing a document that outlines the crimes and lies that led to the collapse of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's plea deal. Meanwhile, NBC News has also learned that in recent days, President Trump's legal team has resumed discussions with the special counsel's office. That is according to two people familiar with the matter. It's been just over 2 weeks since Trump submitted written answers to Mueller regarding the Russia probe. So much that could come out today even that would give us some guidance as to what potentially is going on.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the House Judiciary Committee is set to grill former FBI Director James Comey behind closed doors. Comey agreed to testify if Republicans make his testimony public within 24 hours. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a donation. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The French government is calling in reinforcements ahead of planned demonstrations across the country this weekend. The hope is to avoid a repeat of violent riots last weekend that caused property damage across Paris and left more than 100 people injured. Some 65,000 police officers are already deployed nationwide to monitor the Yellow Vest or Gilets Jaunes protests. That political movement, which involved barricading highways, city streets, and power plants, began last month in protest over a 30 cents a gallon gas tax proposed by President Emmanuel Macron. Jim Adams is a professor of economics at the University of Michigan.
I don't think that it's so much a resistance to the green idea or even the green implementation here. This was just the spark that lit the flame.
Adams says Macron was elected for two reasons: to make the French economy more dynamic and to modify the welfare state to offer greater protection for predominantly younger risk-takers as opposed to merely helping those at the end of long and steady careers. Earlier this week, the French government paused the gasoline tax, but protest demands have only grown to include calls to raise the minimum wage, a sign their frustrations went beyond a gripe over a single new tax.
It happened to be the pretext for this more general discontent that the earliest rounds of reform during the honeymoon period of the Macron administration tended more to do the things that were on the center-right part of his agenda than on the center-left.
While last weekend's violence was a bad look for the Gilets Jaunes, the broader movement has withstood attempts to be co-opted for partisan gain and remains cleverly diffuse and non-hierarchical. And buoyed by widespread public support, don't expect the Gilets Jaunes to surrender their yellow vests just yet. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Let's begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently a chilly 28 degrees Fahrenheit, moving inexorably towards winter. But it's going to be a little cooler today. We're not going to even top 50 today. We're expected to be in the mid-40s or so. Tonight we are expected to be a bit warmer. Overnight lows in the mid-30s rather than in the mid to upper 20s. And that could be because we'll have a cloud cover with rain possibly tonight, maybe dumping just about a tad less than a quarter inch. Now, that's just a chance. It may be going north or south of us, but we'll see. And we aren't really expected to have the big storms coming until late Sunday night. Winds currently are light and variable out of the south-southeast, and will remain so at least through the weekend. And barometric pressure, before I get to that, pollen is rated as none. They're actually measuring it, and they say none. And the air quality index is 64 parts per million in the orange moderate warning range for those of you with breathing problems. And the daytime UV index is at low at 1. Okay, now the barometric pressure is rising. No, I'm sorry, it's holding steady at 30.14 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is 89%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 49 and partly cloudy. Paris is 49 and cloudy with a weather advisory and potential disruption due to wind. So that'll make the protest quite fun, especially if they're laying down tear gas. I guess you don't want to be upwind. Or maybe you do want to. I guess you want to be upwind. And I should also mention that it looks like there is quite a large cell of water coming their way. Lows are going to be at 46. It's 46 right now. Okay, well, they've dropped some temperature, and it might make the protests a little bit precipitous, as they say. They're going to have rain out throughout the weekend with high winds. So if you're in a yellow vest, take care, and don't be a right-winger, okay? We don't like them. Rome is 59 and partly cloudy, also with a weather advisory that we are checking in right now. Also, potential disruption due to winds, and they will have a high of 61 today. Well, that's really nice. Let's go to Rome, even though it's windy. Kiev is 24 and cloudy. Kabul is 42 and fair. I would suggest do not have a wedding party, especially one visible from a drone. Okay. Hong Kong is 61 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 50 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 67 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 47, partly cloudy, and I bet I know what their weather advisory is. It continues to be the beach hazard for sneaker waves. They have large surf. Do not turn your back on the ocean. Ever. Ever, ever. Do not do it. And New York, New York also has a weather advisory at a chilly 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunny. Very clear, but a small craft advisory because you have very high winds as well. Looks like you're topping off about 50 miles per hour, and that's some gusts. So take care. Hold on to your hats, button up your jackets, batten down the hatches, and stay warm. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Luke Barnes brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. British police have arrested 3 neo-Nazis on suspicion of terror offenses. It is understood that the suspects are believed to be part of the Sonnenkrieg division, which has links to a violent U.S. neo-Nazi group responsible for the murder of 5 people. Police arrested a 17-year-old from London, an 18-year-old from Portsmouth, and a 20-year-old from Bath. The operation was led by the Northeast Counterterrorism Unit, and a spokesman said they were part of an ongoing investigation into extreme right-wing activity. You know, the kind that we ignore and pretend doesn't exist. Because there's so many fine people on that side. According to the BBC, which obtained chat logs from the group, the suspects talked online about how police officers should be raped and killed, and that Prince Harry was a race traitor who should be shot. The chats also include senior members of the American group Atomwaffen Division, or the AWD, which is an American neo-Nazi terrorist organization which believes that extreme violence is the only way to destroy the government and bring about the creation of a national socialist state. The decentralized group has been tied to 5 murders in 3 states, including the January murder of 19-year-old Blaise Bernstein, who was stabbed nearly 24 times. Atomwaffen, which means nuclear weapons in German, cites Hitler, Charles Manson, and William Pierce, author of the Turner Diaries, as influences. But let's talk about Saul Alinsky, shall we? In January, authorities arrested Sam Woodward, a former high school classmate of Bernstein's, for his murder. ProPublica then linked Woodward to the Atomwaffen, causing a flood of media and law enforcement attention, which lessened the group's abilities and appeal. However, in July, new graphics similar to the type the Atomwaffen used started appearing advertising the Sonnenkrieg division. They included graphics praising Norwegian mass murderer Anders Behring Breivik and calling for the murder of race mixers. Really now? Well, let's start with you. How about 23andMe? Here, spit on this. British security services are increasingly concerned about the growing threat of far-right extremism in the UK. The right-wing terrorist threat is more significant and more challenging than perhaps the public debate gives it credit for, Mark Rowley, former Scotland Yard Assistant Commissioner, said in February. In October, it was revealed to The Guardian that MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence agency, would take the lead in monitoring far-right terrorism. MI5's usual portfolio includes Islamic extremism and paramilitary activity in Northern Ireland. So the fact that far-right extremism is being examined by the agency indicates the seriousness of the threat.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Oliver Willis brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, hey, Oliver, happy birthday. It's belated. It was yesterday, I know. But happy birthday, Oliver. Well, a new poll shows a majority of Americans think Democrats should share Trump's tax returns with the public. An overwhelming majority believe that, of course. And we know that Trump has kept his tax returns or secret, refusing to release them during his campaign, or since he's taken office, and he is the first nominee of either party in over 40 years to hide his taxes. Well, you'd expect a Russian asset dupe idiot to do that. A new poll from Harvard Capps Harris suggests that Americans want Democrats to get to the bottom of the story. 63% of voters said Democrats should be allowed to use their powers in the majority to get Trump's taxes and get the details to the American public. Of course, you see how the right wing has played the refs? They've gone after Hillary Clinton over just the most spurious, dubious, insane claims. And people have become desensitized. They actually believe deep in their hearts that when they went after Hillary, it was over nothing. So now anytime we get into the power, we're going to be going after nothing just to make it fair. We don't work that way. We actually provide oversight, reasoned decisions based on the evidence. Certain committees in the House and Senate have the power to request any individual's tax returns from the Treasury Secretary, of course, that's Mnuchin, maybe he's going to get to room with Steven Seagal instead of Donnie. Could be. The committee is likely to face opposition from the Trump administration, particularly, Mnuchin, before there are questions growing daily about whether Trump has been financially compromised, either through foreign governments like Saudi Arabia or Russia, or by private entities like those he paid hush money to. Revealing his returns might let the public know where he stands and how his policy choices in the presidency have been affected and will be affected. That's important, too. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. Oh, my gosh. But we will meet up with you on Monday for, River City Hash Mondays, because it's after the weekend. Stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up with you on Monday right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.